the yelling is a pretty brilliant episode of the middle. This is the 14th episode of the first season, and as always, there will be spoilers as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. We have the main part of the narrative, which revolves around yelling. We also have part of it focusing on Mike, so I will just very briefly talk about that, as it only takes up a small part of the episode and a small part of my notes. And then I'll go through the main narrative chronologically. And there's only one thing in this that I don't think makes a tremendous amount of sense, but it's kind of something that happens, well, in the opening scene, but also at the end, but I'll talk about that in a moment. Mike, we learned in the previous episode, I think, maybe the one before that the quarry is unavailable for a few months because Mike found a dinosaur bone and they're digging it up, so he has to find other work. And in this episode, Bob gets him the chance to work with him on night shift, driving for little Betty. And Mike, I love the uniform. It's a little shirt with a little cupcake on. It's adorable. And Mike and Bob are in the van together, and Bob gets upset because his girlfriend breaks up with him over text. Bob is texting while driving, which is infuriating, but Mike does call him out for it, so it's not in support of that, which is good. And Bob gets really upset, of course, and he ends up fleeing from the van. Once they'd stopped, he didn't do it while they were driving. And Mike ends up tackling him to the ground, which I hadn't expected. And we have a nice moment between them, and Mike invites Bob to dinner at the house with Frankie and the kids, which I thought was a really sweet way to conclude that part of the story. It was a nice subplot. It worked well. The main narrative focuses on the fact that Frankie yells a lot. The opening scene is actually Frankie in an office supplies store at 4 o'clock in the morning. And then the rest of the episode is about how she got to that situation. And it starts off with Sue practicing for majorettes, Brick needs a hat for hat day, Axel isn't working on his Aztec report, and Frankie is fed up of the fact that the kids never do anything unless she nags them. And I imagine that that's a common occurrence in families all over. And Bob actually shows Frankie that she can record videos on her phone. So she has a plan. She's going to record, without their knowledge, her kids arguing back at her, complaining whenever she asks them to do anything, and she's going to show them these videos to say, look how you behave. And the excitement was great. I've seen this episode before. I couldn't remember what exactly happened, and I was really looking forward to the kids' reactions when she showed them the video clips. And unfortunately, it doesn't go the way Frankie thought it was going to. She shows them the clips, and yes, we see the kids back chatting and whinging and behaving not very respectably. And then we also see Frankie shouting and yelling at them. And the final clip, honestly, Patricia Heaton is amazing. The final clip that we see of her shouting is fantastic. It is so, so funny. And she decides she's going to quit yelling. And honestly, I could feel the frustration, because we have a series of clips where she comes into the house, says hello to the kids, they're just lounging around, they're not doing anything, and you can just tell that she is so desperate to not necessarily nag them, but remind them that they need to do X, Y, and Z, and it must be exceptionally frustrating knowing that they're not getting anything done. But if she wants to keep her promise and not yell, she can't nag them, because you nag, they backchat, you shout louder, and it just escalates from there. And Mike tells her, maybe you should just trust the kids. And for about 3 minutes, if that seemed to be working out, because Frankie realises that Sue has got her own right to go to majorette tryouts, and Brick managed to find his own hat for hat day. Axel was even working on his paper. Brilliant. Everybody's doing what they need to. Frankie is about to have a nice relaxing bath. The doorbell goes, and it's the baby. The baby and the baby's parent. Sue was meant to be babysitting, but she was supposed to cancel to go to majorette tryouts. Not exactly responsible. I feel like her priorities were not in the right place there. But nevertheless, she was supposed to do this. She forgot to phone and tell the parent that she couldn't babysit. So now Frankie has to watch the baby. But then Axel needs like a cover sheet or something. I'm not entirely sure what it is, but he needs something for his paper, and it's due tomorrow. and the office supply store shuts in, I think Frankie said 11 minutes. So she gives the baby to Axel, goes to the office supply store, and the lights go out. And she's locked in there. And this is the bit I don't think is realistic, because at the beginning we were told that it was 4 o'clock in the morning. Now, I'm not necessarily saying it's unrealistic that she'd be locked in there for, well, what time would majorette tryouts be at? I can't imagine majorette tryouts would be at like midnight. So she must have been in there, let's say, early evening until 4 o'clock. Maybe the security guard took that long to get to her. I don't know. But what is unrealistic is that Mike and the kids arrive at the store pretty much the same time the security guard does. What are the kids doing up at 4 o'clock in the morning on a school night? We know it's a school night because Axel's paper is due the next day. I don't believe it. So if they just changed the time at the beginning, or if they just said middle of the night, I wouldn't have thought anything of it. But that is my only complaint with this episode, that I don't believe it's 4 o'clock in the morning. And it didn't need to be. It could have just been midnight. Brick is there with a shower cap on his head. Presumably he's getting his head lice treatment. Why would you be giving your kid a head lice treatment at 4 o'clock in the morning? You wouldn't be. So I'm thinking too much into it, but it just annoyed me a little bit because it's not realistic and I don't believe it. And in fact, it would have been later than 4 o'clock, because in the opening clip, Frankie was banging on the glass door. But why on the window and on the glass door? Why would she be banging on it at 4 o'clock in the morning when she knew the security guard was on his way? What good would it do to bang on the glass at 4 in the morning when there's nobody around? I'm overthinking it, but it's annoying me because it doesn't make any sense. Let's move on from that. To conclude, aside from the issue with the time we're given at the beginning, I thought the yelling was a really fantastic episode. Very, very funny. Unpredictable. I don't think any of this played out in the way that anybody could guess. And I rather enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun with it. 4 a.m. aside, the yelling is a pretty fantastic episode.